that because she mentions that Fortnite is heroin, but then she goes on and says like how the industry is designing these games to be more addicting. And she's right about that. In some cases, she's right about that. Not in general. She's clearly completely naive to video games and the industry in general, which is why she's the worst possible person to be the messenger, because she doesn't actually understand what she's saying, I think. But what you need to talk about there is like loot boxes and the habit loops. That you would hire a behavioral psychologist to get people addicted to opening loot boxes, which has happened, and why there has to be honest to God discussion about if they're going to keep doing this, does the government need to step in? Because maybe 10-year-old Timmy's got to stop racking up $2,000 credit card bills. That's going to be a complicated piece of legislation, hard to govern, and it's never going to stop the fact that this stuff doesn't just work on Timmy. It works on soccer mom Sally just as well. I've read many articles in my local newspaper of people in my own town who have spent thousands of dollars on Candy Crush. You know, that game that used to be on your computer for free, packaged with Windows 7. It was called Bejeweled. That now has, you know, that shitty mobile game mechanic where you can only do so many moves. You have energy, you exhaust, and so in order to get more turns, you buy turns. And people just don't know any better, I guess. And they get hooked. I'm sorry, I got behind on chat there. Kids who die because they won't stop or go to the bathroom equals addiction. Yeah, right. No, I agree with you there. That's why I'm not against that the World Health Organization declared that video games can be addicting. Like, I agree with you there, Rikers, I do. But I think that people like this psychologist who just doesn't understand video games like you would understand video games. I mean, you worked in the industry, for God's sake. They're still in that really antiquated idea of video gamers as Columbine shooters that makes no sense. And there's been so much effort put in the last few years to like mainstream games, and nothing's gonna happen because they're big business, and that's where we're lucky. At least, you know, in the United States, any market-based economy, there's not gonna be too much done with them because they just generate too much money and they pay their taxes. So we're kind of in forever, I think. But I just want to stop being demonized. I want gamers to stop generally being demonized as smelly, fat people who shoot up schools and are basically drug addicts and useless. Because I just think that's so totally unfair. You know, we were doing really good there for a while. Like, Ronda Rousey came out as a World of Warcraft player. And there's been a bunch of... I'm gonna die. My God. I died as I ran away, and there's not anything close. I hate the drift, too. That guy's like a pleb, I might... Oh, we got it! You know, that was cool. That was cool. I was like, and John, there was really, really great indie games being made, and what was, I think, even better for the industry is that the designers were putting their names on it. Like Sid Meier and, oh, shoot. Right. The guy from Maxis. The guy who's like super, super smart, but he's really eccentric. I think his name's Edgar Wright, Alan Wright, something like that. You know, Wright. Like, when these people started putting their face to the game and putting their name on the box, that started changing the perception of who game developers are and who gamers are. And now we're kind of like back to the Stone Age with some of this shit. That was super close, dude. Yeah, the little win to get the feeling. We talked about that in school too. Trigger, success, reward, little progressions. I read about that stuff in the terms of like your own life. Like, you know, you obviously set habits to try to put your own life on the right track. Knowing that this is something that's in your brain regardless, you might as well try to take some conscious control over your habits. There was a really good book called Habits that wasn't really about the science of it. It was actually more about like the overall effect of it in both civilization and on people. And then I read a really good psychological book on it called Triggers that went super in depth. It was actually a fantastic book. But I think that you want to use that science for good, not bad. You know, casinos are shitheads, man. That's why I don't believe in gambling. I voted against legalization of gambling in Ohio, and I don't mind talking about that vote. I just think that gambling is a scam. And it hurts people, it wastes money, and I think that they do some really nefarious stuff. But it's a democracy, you know, so I'm not gonna fucking go blow up the world because I didn't win my vote. But I personally don't believe in gambling. And that's why it would be terrible for that sort of attitude of like, how can we manipulate people to maximum reward and be damned the consequences? Be damned the consequences in their life in video games. Which is obviously something that we've been struggling with in these last few years, and it's really, really sad. That we went from Morrowind and Call of Duty Modern, even the early Call of Duties. The games of the late 90s, early 2000s. To where we've been slowly but surely at now, where these mobile game mechanics and these casino type statistical psychological analysis is. That's why I can't support Destiny. I mean, they're one of the main companies who said, yeah, we hired a behavioral psychologist. We want to get you loot. We want to get you hooked. It's their fault if the government steps in. I don't think that legislation's going anywhere. It seems like it's pretty much dead in the water and has no interest, will so. But it's their fault as in like the kids or as in the industry itself, will so. As far as if you're saying the industry itself, I don't think you're wrong. They're kind of, it's the whole golden goose thing, right? You got a goose that lays the golden egg, but that's not enough. So you try to cut open the goose and get every golden egg, and what do you know? Now you don't get any, and the goose is dead. And I think that's, especially EA, especially in the state of Anthem, they've been one of the prime. And that's though where I think it can get a little bit gray, because I don't disagree with you, but it's like you don't go to war with a country. Say there was like a rogue guy from Canada who went in the United States and shot a bunch of Americans. You wouldn't go to war with Canada. You'd be like, wow, that was shitty. And probably Canada and the United States would hug and be like, we love one another, and man, he's just crazy. And I feel like that's kind of where the industry's at. It's more than one crazy person, to be fair, but it's just a few outliers that have been really, really shitty about it, like EA. But Gearbox has been doing right. But I suppose that the argument that could be made to counter that is like, and yeah, they've been doing right. They won't be affected by the legislation because, they're not doing the loot boxes and all this crazy stuff, so it doesn't really matter. They wouldn't be impacted by any legislation if the legislation's done properly, which I think is going to be really, really hard. So far, all the language of any of these bills that have been proposed have always been like, think of the children. Think of the children. We're gonna try to ban loot boxes for 13 and under and stuff. I still think it's like porn on the internet. Like, okay, that consent form doesn't mean anything. I was looking at porn when I was 14, easy. It was different when it was at, in the video store. Then you actually couldn't get at it. There was a person there who was ready to take your ID, and you couldn't go into like the shitty Walmart beads area because that's where all the pornos were. Not so with the internet. You could get on your freaking, Windows PC that has a whopping 1 kilobyte of everything and, 10 watts of power, and you could sit there and look at some of the craziest shit the world has to offer. And that's going to be the same thing with any of this legislation. It's digital. Okay, you have to sign a consent form that says you're 13. Okay. All right. You're 8. Yes, I'm 13. There you go. You can buy loot boxes. I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we're actually, whether the legislation needs to happen or not, I think that's a good question and a good debate to have, but I haven't seen any legislation. I haven't seen anything in the language of the bill that makes me feel like it would actually do anything or mean anything. But I think that my opinion on the matter is that the industry, what we need is a bill that's strong enough that, even though I don't think it'll pass, but it's a warning. It's a shot off the bow. It says, hey, if we keep seeing that you're basically become casinos, and you got to drive to a casino, and a casino is going to make sure you're 21. You got to walk through the doors. We can't do that on the internet. We can't not do that in games and these consoles and this digital marketplace. You got to get some legislation out there that says you guys are fucked. If you are literally, doing the casino style stuff, and you are manipulating people to make more purchases and get them addicted, then we're going to come down hard on you. And that's not there yet. If we do think there should be legislation, that is. The shitty part, yeah, I do too. Little things build up to big things, right? The shitty part is if I miss or I don't do them, I feel like shit, right? Isn't that so strange? That's like me with weightlifting. I mean, I'm not trying to be like, oh, macho man, but I've done that since I was a teenager. If I don't have lifting in my life, I feel like death. It's something I rely on. It's still super hard to do it, you know, to motivate yourself or whatever, and to actually do it. But I do know that if I don't do it, I'm going to feel like death. But if I do it, I feel like, I'm on top of the world. The brain is strange, man. That's why you can't compare Fortnite to heroin. You can't say that just because they know how the brain works, they're therefore at fault. She was a psychologist too. It's like, it's just how the brain works. You form habits. I agree. There's a girl my wife works with. She loses hundreds a week to casinos. Okay, so we were talking about habits, Rikers, and we were talking about the habits loop. And that one book that talks more about like societies mentions a woman in there. It was really, really interesting. It was a great story. She was a stay-at-home mom, and her kids were getting older, so they were spending less time at the house, and so she had like large parts of her day where she was just chilling. So she started going to casinos. And at first, she did really well, and she actually found she was good at cards and good at poker, and made money and did good. And she like gave herself a limit of $800. You know, $800 became $2,000, and then finally she started to lose some money. One time she was able to like pay off their car, another time she was able to pay off all their bills, but then she started to lose money. And when she started to lose money, she started to gain a lot of debt. And the habit started seeping in. Finally, she had to like come clean with her husband that she'd actually bankrupted them. So she filed for bankruptcy, and she cut up all her credit cards. She said she was done. She was done gambling. And she actually still owed the casino a bunch of money. Her parents died. Her parents died, and they left her a bunch of money because they happened to be wealthy. And they were very quiet about it. You know, they were like modest in their means, and she didn't even know her parents were rich. They were rich, and they gave her basically everything. And so she bought a new house, and everything was really good, and she was not going to gamble this time. But she like told her husband, she's like, just one last run. Just one last run. I've got to do it. So she went and she gambled, and she went back to the casino that she still owed the debts from before. But the casino, oddly enough, was really, really nice to her. And they're like, you know, Sherry, we'll just call her Sherry. How the hell are you? It's great to see you. I'm really sorry about your parents. They knew about her parents somehow. They knew basically everything about her life up to that point. And as an aside, this whole story ties into Target. Target has apparently one of the best statistical analysis across the industry. And they caused a big harumph. You may have heard about this in the news, where a dad called Target. He was really pissed because he had gotten coupons in the mail for his teenage daughter that had to do with diapers and milk bottles and, you know, that kind of stuff. He said, you know, what are you trying to imply? And the manager was very embarrassed and apologized profusely. Oh, I'm sorry, sir. There must have been some mistake in the system. And the guy was like, oh, I'd say. And he caused a big to-do, and he called the manager up the next day, and he's like, I know, I'm sorry, we're working on this, we're gonna make this situation right. And the guy said, I actually owe you an apology. It turns out my daughter is pregnant, and I didn't know anything about it. He said, well, it turns out there's been some illicit business going on in my home I wasn't aware of. You know how it is. And how it happened is that Target has become extremely good. Their computer programs and their statistical analysis is extremely good, and they're able to tell based on your purchases at this point if you're probably pregnant, or if you're expecting, or where you're at in your life, or if you're traveling. And of course, some people feel very, very creeped out about that, and it's one of those things. But Target keeps people loyal because they always seem to be able to give you coupons that are going to be exactly for what you're going to need. Some people think that that's great, and it shows that technology is starting to benefit our lives. Other people find that a massive invasion of privacy. Well, so the larger point of that, and why that ties into the whole gambling story, is that it turns out casinos are even better at it than Target. And what casinos do is they have all the same analysis, and they look at it through the lens of just how much money they can take you for. What's the maximum earnings they'll ever get off of you? They knew that she ran debts, but they also knew she was a gambling addict, and they knew that she had become wealthy again because her parents died. So they brought her in with open arms, and they said the casino would give her free meals every day. They would give her rides straight to the casino in a limousine. They bought her free tickets to an Eagles concert and all of her friends, and had her at the best hotels, all for free. And of course, she started to gamble. And what she felt, she said, was a huge obligation to him. She started to run debts again. Really bad debts, of course. And they only had $200,000 left in the bank. And the casino called her and said, show up. We need you this weekend. Aren't you going to come out? We'd love to see you. We'll fly you out. And she'd be like, no, I can't. Because she was going to be done again. She knew she was in trouble. And they said, but we did all these things for you. We put you in the nicest hotels. We took you to that Eagles concert. How could you not show up? How could you not come and hang out at the casino and gamble? And so she said she felt really guilty. And this shows up later in court, because this all had to do with a lawsuit. I'll tell you the conclusion of that lawsuit in a moment. And so she said, yeah, okay, I'll go. So her and her husband went out. One last to do, it was supposed to be. She goes out the night before, goes to a small casino, one of these just, little mom and pop casinos that are all over Vegas, and lost $100,000. She just couldn't get hot. She never turned it around, and never told her husband that the night before the big gambling run, she'd already lost $100K. She shows up and she gambles for 18 hours straight, and she's losing and losing and losing. Come around 2 a.m., she starts to make a run. But at this point, she's already signed 2 rain checks with the casino. She's broke even at this point. If she walks away, she's completely even, but she stays. She figures she's got a hot hand. It's turned around. She's going to try to come out of this thing positive. She loses everything. She asks the casino for more credit. They say no. It turns out, this was later revealed in the court, that at that precise moment, she had hit exactly what the computer said she would be able to make the casino. If they stuck with it, they'd be able to get, like $500,000 off of her. And she had hit that $500,000 mark at that moment. It was over. She literally collapsed in the hallway. They had nothing. And they lost their house. They filed for bankruptcy. So this story, to conclude here, and then I'm going to catch up with chat. She sued the casinos. This was in the state of Indiana. She sued the casinos, and what she said was that she was preyed upon, that the casinos knew that she was a gambling addict and that she had a problem, and they manipulated her with AI and with, a fake smile to lose everything. And they knew better. They knew they were manipulating her. While the casino argued that she always had a choice. They didn't stick a gun to her head. The court cited, the Supreme Court of Indiana, cited in favor of the casinos by saying, as the casinos argued, that she was still in control. She could have made a conscious choice. Her gambling addictions, especially because of her past and that she knew she was a gambling addict, meant that she was ultimately responsible for her own actions. Now, you guys might feel differently about that, but that's the power of habit. What to expect when we know you're expecting. They have stuff in the UK too, super crazy level as well. What, like statistical analysis and stuff. That's how AI will control everything. Well, machine learning and data. I mean, that's definitely the future, and how we end up using that technology for better or for good is going to say a lot. I've killed very little while telling those stories. She was also in a vulnerable state. She was. I mean, I'm not the judge. But that's how the court found it. And so she owes tons of money. In fact, I even think she had to do a brief stint in prison. It was one of those things where you can't pay your debts, so you just go to jail. But that's a complex legal topic. But as far as the state of Indiana recognizes it, if you're a gambling addict, then you've got to deal with that problem. It's just like a drug company or an alcohol company. An alcohol company can't be held responsible if an alcoholic drowns on his own vomit. Imagine the implications for that. If every single time somebody drowned in Johnny Walker or ruined their life from Johnny Walker was responsible. It's like the topic they brought up it's actually working its way through the courts right now at Sandy Hook. Sandy Hook, where we had that shooting and a bunch of kids died. The Supreme Court says you can't sue gun companies in these cases where, you know, people die of gun violence. But I'm pretty sure it's Connecticut. Sandy Hook's in Connecticut. Correct me if I'm wrong. It has said you can. The state of Connecticut is saying go ahead with the lawsuit. And that's working its way through the courts right now, where the parents of the Sandy Hook kids have sued like Remington Rifle and stuff. It's a similar situation. Now, obviously, it's a lot worse because there's these children that have died, but do the larger forces at play, do they deserve some share of the responsibility? And if we decide generally, we've decided with alcohol, no. We've decided with cigarettes, no. We've decided with gambling, no. I don't think guns, I'm nearly positive, as much as I'm so sorry to those parents for what they've had to go through, I don't think they're going to win. So therefore, I think the industry would sue if there is any kind of legislation to ban loot boxes, and it's going to say, it's not our fault. You got a choice, and you're making that choice. That's generally how our courts have run for the last few decades anyways. That's why I like the Second Amendment. Our Second Amendment's not going to change any because the Supreme Court recognized it within the broadest sense, that the right to bear arms doesn't have to do with a militia, it has to do with private gun ownership. And once that decision was, you know, completely, that's our understanding of the law. That's it. It was this book. I didn't read it all the way. I saw this guy have a talk on C-SPAN about it, and then I went and grabbed his book. It's called Armed in America. And I didn't read it all the way because it was really dry. But it did mention that, and that's where I learned that, is that he said he was writing his book, he knew he couldn't change anything, that nothing could actually change with that law, but that he disagreed with the judgment because he said that, like, always historically we argued the Second Amendment within the context of a militia, and it was just recently that we changed it. These other things, age verification, I'd say, yeah, it is fit, man. That's I think you're right there. That's a good point. And so then the question becomes, how do you enforce it? How do you make it that kids under the age of 13 can't use loot boxes? It's going to be super hard. Because like Roblox, my nephew loves Roblox. Some of those games are good. Some of them are just awful. And a lot of them are pay to win. I mean, hella pay to win. Because Roblox made it the developers can make money through those games now. And I thought I turned the game music off, sorry. And like one my nephew got kind of hooked on, and then I got hooked on it. It was so stupid. It has loot boxes, and like every 2 minutes it wants you to buy a loot box, and when you go and you do something, it does the worst possible thing you can do for these games, which is like you're doing just a common menu interaction, and while you're doing the common menu interaction, it'll have the pop-up that's like, hey, you want to buy some loot boxes? And you accidentally hit A. There's a lot of them that do that shit. It's just going to be a really big effort to try to clean that up. Sorry, Records, I got kind of behind there. That's so frustrating. It's like an abusive relation. Oh, dude, 100%. That's why I said I don't believe in gambling. Like, if people do it, they do it. I didn't want it in my state. That's why I voted that way. Because you have plenty of ways you can wreck your life. Maybe we ought to have one less. You know, the house always wins. The house always wins. It's a very complex case. Isn't the difference between loot boxes? Then it gets into, I really want regulations on my video games pop up stuff like hot garbage. I like that video games are basically unregulated. I don't like bureaucracy. I don't like red tape. I don't like big government. That's just my personal opinion. I think a government is best that governs least. I like that video games, unlike so many other things anymore, are the Wild West. It's hard to make a movie. There's a lot of rules. There didn't used to be a lot of rules, but now it's pretty hard to make a movie. You know, it's tough to go and start a shop. You got to go and talk to your city. You got to get in the right zone. You have to be approved for licenses. You got to get insurances. You got to get OSHA involved. There's so many different things. That's why I felt compelled to go into video games, because it's one of those areas where the state, the local, and the federal government doesn't have a magnifying glass over every little thing you do, and you can still just make something. Quietly on your own, you can come to this frontier and do whatever you came to do. It's like the Wild West. And I think it's really too bad that the industry has blown it so much that now we've invited the man in our life. They did it to themselves, and it's so frustrating. I've got something wrong with my lungs. I have no idea what it is. I'm gonna have to have my right lung, man. Every time I breathe in, I get a rattle. And I'm not sick. I feel fine. But it's weirding me out. It's weirding me out, dude. That pop-up stuff, it is hot garbage. And that's... So, I'm okay with regulation, but I hope it isn't as bad as what some regulation is. Like, yeah, it's difficult to make a movie. You really want to do it, you can do it. But you've got to get express approval from basically everyone. You've got to sign consent forms if anyone's even going to be remotely in the movie. You got to get the permission to film. Everyone's got to be, you know, like, then your actors got to be on special permissions, and it's just, that's why there's guerrilla filmmaking anymore, because to make a movie completely within your rights, completely legally to make a movie, is an absolute red tape nightmare. And there's a lot of industries that are like that anymore, and I think it kills the fun, at least. At the very least, it kills the fun. Like, my grandpa was an oil man, you know, and he was an oil man back in the days of the Wildcatter. Oil industry probably needed some regulations, but used to be you could just go out and drill a well. Everyone's like, oh, the evils of the oil industry, the evils of the oil industry. There used to be a ton of small and medium oil companies. It's all the different regulations that's made it that there's only really a few big ones anymore. There's a guy like J. Paul Getty used to be able to go out and make $1 billion by drilling some oil wells. Just happens, and I guess we're all gonna get to live to see it happen to video games now. Regulation helps the big guys, is the sad thing. Your indie developers that we all love, like this Risk of Rain 2 that came out recently that everyone's been a big fan of. Games like Braid. Your indies will be the one that are hurt. It's already happened in Europe. Europe, you know, passed all that sweeping legislation that had to do with internet privacy. And a ton of indie studios shut down because they weren't able to pay the cost to keep up with that regulation. But who can? Well, EA, of course they can. Activision Blizzard, of course they can. There's this, it's a noble thought. You would think it would help. But in the long run, it tends to hurt. They're going to be able to pay for the lawyers. They're going to be able to pay for the bureaucratic arm to make sure that they're within the regulation. But the two dudes who are making a game in their garage that might turn out to be the next Borderlands or might turn out to be the next Final Fantasy, they can't. That might be it. I can't believe we're at round 10, man. I've just been talking and chilling and not trying to take it too serious. So far, it's working. If they're going to do regulation, what I'm saying is it's got to be limited. Very, very small. We can't have it to where, like, indie game developers have to, you know, buy 80,000 insurances and have to buy a license and have to talk to their mayor. It'll ruin it. Shit. That was my risky decision to this. Oh! Fuck. I think we're on wave 3 or 4. Dude, that was literally last second. Shit! No! 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 We died as we went through.